long before the CIA, MI6, or Mossad, before wiretaps, satellites, or encrypted phones, there was an empire held together not by swords or shields, but by whispers, lies, and shadows. Imagine ruling a kingdom so vast it stretched farther than the eye could see. Enemies surrounded you. Assassins lurked in the dark. Armies marched beyond the horizon. And yet, your greatest weapon wasn't an army or even a sword. It was information. This is the story of the world's very first spy network, a system so advanced and secretive, it decided the fate of empires and changed the course of history forever. 2,500 years ago, the ancient world was a place of chaos. Powerful city-states and empires clashed, and rumors of rebellion spread faster than the armies that fought them. No ruler could see everything, no matter how powerful they were. By the time a king heard about a rebellion, it might already be too late. Now, imagine you are Cyrus the Great, the man who forged the Persian Empire. Your dominion stretches from the Mediterranean to the edge of India. It is the largest empire the world has ever seen. But power like this breeds fear. Fear breeds plots. Plots breed traitors, and traitors strike in silence. Cyrus realized that the greatest threat to his empire didn't come from rival armies, but from secrets he could not see. If rebellion took root in one province, it could spread like wildfire. By the time his generals arrived with troops, the entire region might already be lost. He needed something more powerful than swords and shields. He needed to see the invisible. And so, Cyrus created something the world had never seen before. A vast network of spies known as the eyes and ears of the king. They were everywhere. A merchant in a crowded marketplace, casually weighing grain, could be one of them. A friendly traveler sharing stories at a tavern could secretly serve the crown. Even a governor ruling a distant province might secretly report, not just on his people, but on other governors. Their mission was simple: observe, report, control. Every rumor, every whisper, every hint of treachery was gathered and sent back to the king. Nothing escaped their watch. This wasn't just spying. It was surveillance on a scale the world had never seen. Every city was a potential nest of informants. Every road carried messengers who might be couriers of truth or carriers of lies. But there was a dark side to this power, because when everyone could be a spy, no one could be trusted. Friends turned on friends. Families lived in fear of each other. A careless word whispered in anger could mean imprisonment or execution. In time, the network became so feared that people stopped speaking openly at all. The empire grew quiet, not with peace, but with paranoia. One night, in a bustling city near the empire's edge, a trusted governor received a message. It was urgent. It spoke of a rebellion forming in a neighboring province, a rebellion that could erupt within days. The governor acted fast. He summoned a courier, handed him a sealed clay tablet, and sent him galloping through the night. On that tablet was a single chilling phrase: "The snake is ready to strike." If it reached the king in time, the rebellion could be stopped before it began. But if the message was intercepted, the entire province would fall. And with it, the empire could begin to unravel. The courier rode hard through the darkness. But here's the danger. The same network that carried secrets could also betray them. Every messenger, every informant, every spy had a choice: serve the king or serve themselves. Imagine being that courier. You carry a message that could save an empire, but it could also get you killed. If you deliver it, you risk being hunted by the rebels. If you betray it, you might earn a fortune and a very dangerous set of enemies. What would you do? Would you stay loyal? Or would you sell the fate of millions to the highest bidder? And sometimes, the traitor wasn't outside the system. Sometimes the most dangerous spy was inside the network itself. One of Cyrus's most trusted agents, a man who had risen high within the eyes and ears, began secretly selling secrets to Persia's enemies. With every report he delivered, he planted lies and misinformation. With every whisper he carried, he fanned the flames of rebellion. The empire was rotting from within, and the king didn't even know it. The question became, who watches the watchers? How do you find the spy among spies when everyone around you could be lying? This is the nightmare Cyrus now faced. A vast empire teetering on the edge of chaos. An invisible network of informants. And one traitor clever enough to stay hidden for now. Then, a single message reached the Persian court. It wasn't the warning Cyrus expected. It was just one word, hastily carved into clay: betrayal. By the time he read it, the rebellion had already begun to move. His most trusted informant had vanished. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of his empire, a plan was unfolding that could bring the mighty Persian king to his knees. The first spy network in history had been unleashed, but now it was at war with itself, and the fate of the ancient world hung in the balance. Cyrus the Great sat in silence. The clay tablet with a single word, betrayal, rested in his hands like a deadly weapon. The room around him was frozen, his advisors waiting for the king's reaction. The word wasn't just a warning. It was a dagger aimed at the heart of the Persian Empire. Somewhere in his vast network of spies, someone had turned. And now, Cyrus didn't just need to crush a rebellion. He needed to hunt a traitor. The rebellion began in a distant province, far from the empire's center. A charismatic noble had been secretly gathering followers, promising to overthrow Persian rule and create a kingdom of his own. On the surface, his city seemed calm. Merchants traded, soldiers patrolled, priests prayed. But beneath that calm, the seeds of insurrection were already sprouting. Cyrus's spy network, the eyes and ears of the king, should have detected this long before it reached this point. The fact that they hadn't meant one terrifying truth: someone inside the network was deliberately hiding information. Cyrus's greatest fear wasn't an enemy he could see. It was silence. The sudden quiet before an explosion. The absence of whispers in places that used to hum with secrets. It meant his spies were either dead or compromised. The king called his most trusted intelligence officer, General Arvahan, to his side. Arvahan was a man of shadows, rarely seen in public, yet feared by everyone who knew his name. If Cyrus was the head of the empire, Arvahan was its unseen hand. "There is a traitor," Cyrus said simply, placing the tablet on the table between them. "I want him found. I want to know his name before this rebellion spreads." Arvahan bowed his head. "Majesty, if there is a traitor within the eyes and ears, then he already knows we are hunting him. He will bury himself so deep that not even the sun will find him." Cyrus's voice hardened. "Then dig deeper. If you must burn down the forest to catch one snake, so be it." Arvahan understood the stakes. The eyes and ears were the lifeblood of the empire. Without them, Cyrus ruled blind. But Arvahan also knew the truth. The more powerful the network became, the more dangerous it was to its own master. Spies didn't just serve kings. They served themselves, their ambitions, their fears, their greed. And somewhere out there was a spy who had learned to play both sides. The Persian spy network was unlike anything the world had seen. It operated on 3 levels. The surface level, informants hidden among merchants, priests, and soldiers. They reported on local events, rumors, and minor plots. The secret level, regional overseers who collected reports and filtered out noise. They decided what information reached the capital and what was buried. The shadow level, the deepest, most secret layer, known only to Cyrus and a handful of his closest agents. These were spies sent into rival kingdoms, posing as diplomats, traders, or even entertainers. Their reports came through coded messages hidden in art, music, and poetry. It was this 3rd level where the traitor likely hid. Only someone with access to the deepest secrets could conceal a rebellion this large. Arvahan devised a test. He would send 3 false messages through different channels of the network. One warned of an imaginary rebellion in the north. Another claimed a foreign power was planning an invasion. The third hinted that a key general was plotting against Cyrus himself. Whichever rumor reached the rebels would reveal the traitor's path. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, and every move risked disaster. Meanwhile, far from the capital, a single spy walked alone through a crowded marketplace. His name was Cyrus, and he was a mid-level informant, tasked with gathering whispers from merchants and travelers. He'd been loyal to the Empire his whole life, or so he believed. That morning, he received a sealed order stamped with the royal seal. The instructions were simple. Deliver this message to the temple at dusk. Do not read it. But curiosity is the oldest enemy of loyalty, and Cyrus couldn't resist. When he opened the message, his blood ran cold. It didn't contain intelligence. It contained his own name, listed among traitors to be executed. Confused and terrified, Cyrus fled the city. He didn't realize that he had just been caught in Arvahan's trap. The message was fake, bait meant to expose the real traitor. But someone had tampered with it. Someone who wanted Cyrus silenced forever. As night fell, the rebellion's leaders gathered in a secret chamber beneath an ancient temple. The charismatic noble leading the uprising, known only as Varganes, addressed his followers. The king believes his eyes can see all. His ears can hear all, Varganes said, pacing before a flickering torch. But he cannot see into the shadows. He cannot hear what we choose to keep silent. He held up a clay tablet, one of Cyrus's own intelligence reports. The enemy's strength lies in fear. We will turn that fear against him. Our man is already inside the heart of his network. While the king chases ghosts, we will strike where he least expects. His followers raised their fists in silent agreement. The rebellion was no longer a whisper. It was a storm ready to break. Back in the capital, Arvahan's experiment began to bear fruit. 2 of the 3 false rumors vanished into the network, never resurfacing. But one reached the rebels intact. The story of a foreign power plotting an invasion. That meant the traitor was operating in the southern branch of the network. Arvahan smiled grimly. The web was tightening, but the traitor was clever. He had anticipated this move, and he had prepared a counter-trap. The next morning, a courier arrived at the palace, bearing an urgent message from the south. The message claimed to reveal the exact location of the rebel army. Cyrus ordered immediate action. Troops marched toward the site at dawn, expecting to crush the rebellion in one decisive blow. When they arrived, they found nothing but empty hills. And as they turned back, smoke rose behind them, their own supply lines set ablaze. The rebel army had struck elsewhere, perfectly timed. It was a devastating blow. Not only had the king's forces been humiliated, but now no one knew who to trust. The network was collapsing under its own paranoia. Cyrus, still on the run, stumbled into a hidden camp in the wilderness. There, he discovered other agents like himself, informants who had been framed, silenced, or abandoned by the network. Some were bitter, some were terrified, but all of them had one thing in common. They had seen too much. Among them was a former royal courier who revealed a shocking truth. The traitor wasn't just manipulating reports, he was creating them. Entire rebellions, invasions, and plots were being fabricated to control the king's decisions. Cyrus wasn't ruling the empire anymore. The traitor was. As this revelation sank in, Cyrus realized the depth of the danger. The rebellion wasn't just a military threat. It was psychological warfare on a scale the world had never seen. If the king couldn't trust his own spies, his power would crumble without a single battle. Meanwhile, in the capital, Arvahan confronted Cyrus. "Sire, we are no longer fighting rebels," Arvahan said grimly. "We are fighting ideas. lies so carefully planted that they grow into truth. Cyrus's fists clenched. Then we burn out the roots. Every overseer, every informant, every courier. No one is above suspicion. Arvahan hesitated. To purge the network is to destroy it, Majesty. Without it, we are blind. Cyrus's eyes were cold. Better blind than poisoned. But even as Cyrus prepared to dismantle his own creation, the traitor was preparing his boldest move yet. A message was sent directly to Vardanes, the rebel leader. Strike now. The king suspects nothing. The rebels began to mobilize, preparing to march on a key Persian stronghold. If they succeeded, the empire's entire western frontier would fall. Yet, as the rebels prepared for war, another message was quietly delivered, not to them, but to Cyrus. A whisper in the night. The traitor is closer than you think. He wears the king's trust like a mask. The stage was set for a deadly game. Cyrus's forces were divided. The network was crumbling, and the rebels were ready to strike. Cyrus now faced an impossible choice. Expose the traitor and risk being silenced forever, or stay hidden and watch the empire burn. The first spy network in history had become a battlefield, and the line between truth and deception had vanished completely. As dawn broke, the fate of millions hung on a single question. Who could be trusted? The answer was about to change everything. The morning sky above the Persian capital burned red, as if the heavens themselves sensed the coming bloodshed. Inside the royal palace, tension coiled like a snake ready to strike. Couriers rushed through echoing halls, their sandals slapping against polished stone. Soldiers lined the corridors, gripping spears, their eyes darting nervously. Cyrus the Great stood at the center of this storm, staring at a massive map spread across a table. Cities, roads, fortresses, lines of ink traced the veins of his empire like a living body. And somewhere within this body, a disease was spreading. The rebellion had already struck once, humiliating his army and shaking the foundation of his rule. Now, with new intelligence pointing to an imminent attack, Cyrus prepared for his next move. But deep down, he knew the truth. Every piece of information before him could be a lie. For centuries, kings had relied on strength, armies, walls, and fear to control their realms. Cyrus had gone further. He had built a network of whispers, a system so advanced it could see into every corner of his empire, the eyes and ears of the king. But now, those same whispers were turned against him. Reports flowed in like rivers, yet each one was tainted, twisted by unseen hands. The traitor wasn't just hiding inside the network. He was controlling it. General Arvahan stormed into the war room, his face grim. "The rebels are on the move," he said. "Our scouts report a march toward the western stronghold." Cyrus didn't look up from the map. "How certain is this report?" Arvahan hesitated. Certain enough. The pause was all Cyrus needed to hear. He slammed his fist against the table, rattling clay markers representing his troops. "Enough?" His voice echoed through the hall. "I am asked to gamble the fate of my empire on enough? Do you not understand, Arvahan? Every word we receive may come from the traitor's tongue." Arvahan met his gaze without flinching. "Then give me permission, Majesty. Let me tear down the network piece by piece until the truth is revealed." Cyrus's jaw tightened. "You would burn down the forest to catch one snake." Arvahan nodded. "Yes, because if we do nothing, the snake will strangle us all." Far away, in a hidden encampment, Cyrus crouched beside a dying fire. He was no longer the loyal informant he once was. Now he was a fugitive, hunted by both sides. The ragged group of exiled spies he had discovered whispered among themselves. They were bitter, broken people, some framed, some betrayed, all discarded by the system they once served. One older man, a former royal courier, leaned close to Cyrus. "You still don't see it, do you? This rebellion, it's just a shadow play, a distraction. The real war isn't on the battlefield. It's in here. He tapped his temple. Karaz frowned. What are you saying? The traitor doesn't need to raise an army. He doesn't need to fight Cyrus directly. All he needs is to make the king doubt his own network. When the eyes and ears collapse, the empire collapses with it. Back in the capital, Cyrus paced alone in his private chamber. He remembered when the network had been his pride, a living web of trust and loyalty. But trust was a fragile thing. He thought of his own generals, his governors, even his closest advisors. Any one of them could be a traitor, even Arvahan. The realization twisted in his gut like a blade. He could command armies, but he could no longer command certainty. At dusk, a mysterious message arrived at the palace. It was written on parchment so old, it nearly crumbled in Cyrus's hands. The words were few, but they chilled him to the bone. He wears the king's trust like a mask. No signature, no origin, just those words. Cyrus stared at them, heart pounding. Who was this? He? How close was the traitor? And who had sent this cryptic warning? Meanwhile, Arvahan executed his plan to flush the traitor out. He deliberately spread two conflicting pieces of intelligence to different branches of the network. One report claimed that the rebels were marching west. The other said they were moving south. Only one was true. Whichever region reacted correctly would expose the traitor's position, but the traitor anticipated the move. He intercepted both reports and twisted them. By dawn, chaos erupted. Persian forces clashed with each other, each believing the other was a rebel army. Smoke rose from burning supply lines. The empire was devouring itself. In the rebel camp, Vardanes received news of the chaos. He smiled coldly. The king no longer rules his empire, he said to his inner circle. Our man rules it for him, and soon the mask will fall. One of his lieutenants frowned. And when the king is destroyed, then we destroy the traitor as well, Vardanes said. No one outside this circle must ever know who truly guided this war. Even among rebels, betrayal was inevitable. Cyrus and the exiled spies decided to act. They couldn't reach Cyrus directly. The palace was too heavily guarded. But they could follow the flow of false messages back to their source. Night after night, they tracked couriers through forests and deserts, intercepting sealed tablets, decoding symbols. Each clue brought them closer to the center of the web. Finally, they found it. A hidden chamber beneath a seemingly ordinary warehouse. Inside, they discovered a vast table covered with maps and coded reports. Candles flickered over stacks of clay tablets, each containing orders that could topple cities. And at the center of it all, a single insignia carved into the wood, a serpent eating its own tail. Karaz's breath caught. The symbol wasn't just a mark. It was a message. The network was consuming itself. As Cyrus studied the evidence, he realized something horrifying. The traitor wasn't working against Cyrus, not entirely. He was using Cyrus's own paranoia as a weapon. Every purge, every execution, every whisper of mistrust only strengthened the traitor's control. The king himself had become the traitor's greatest tool. That night, Cyrus made a desperate decision. He would return to the capital and confront Cyrus face to face. Even if it meant his death, the truth had to be revealed. The exiled spies warned him. Once you step into that palace, there is no turning back. If the king believes you're lying, he'll have you executed on the spot. Cyrus nodded grimly. Then I'll have one chance to speak. One chance to save the empire. As Cyrus began his perilous journey, events in the capital spiraled toward disaster. Arvahan discovered that the latest intelligence reports, ones he had personally verified, were forged. The seals, the handwriting, even the courier routes, all perfect imitations. Someone wasn't just intercepting messages. They were replacing reality itself. In the palace war room, Cyrus received 3 urgent reports in rapid succession. rebels attacking the western frontier, a governor plotting to overthrow him in the east, his own general, Arvahan, secretly siding with the enemy. The king's hands trembled as he read the third message. Could it be true? Had his most loyal servant been the traitor all along? Arvahan entered the room moments later, unaware of the accusation hanging over him. "Majesty," he began, but Cyrus cut him off. "Silence." The king roared. "Do not speak another word, serpent." Arvahan froze, stunned. "Majesty, what are you?" Cyrus drew his sword. "The rebellion spreads because you let it. You've been feeding me lies while my empire burns." Arvahan's eyes widened. "Majesty, no! It's a trap. Can't you see? This is exactly what the traitor wants." But Cyrus's rage drowned out reason. Guards surged forward, seizing Arvahan. The general struggled, shouting, "You're blind, Cyrus! Blind to the real enemy." As he was dragged away, his words echoed through the hall. Outside the palace walls, Bardanes' army advanced. The rebels were ready to strike the capital itself. But even Vardanes didn't realize that his own forces were pawns in a greater game. The true traitor had no allegiance, not to Cyrus, not to the rebels. His goal was chaos, because in chaos, he alone held the truth. As night fell, Cyrus reached the outskirts of the capital. Exhausted and bleeding from the journey, he stared at the city's towering walls. Inside those walls, a king prepared to execute his most loyal general, a rebellion prepared to topple an empire, and a traitor watched from the shadows, unseen, smiling. Cyrus whispered to himself, "If I fail, history will never know who truly destroyed us." He took a deep breath and stepped forward. Inside the palace dungeon, Arvahan waited for execution. In the darkness, a voice spoke from the shadows. "General," it hissed, "you served the king well, but the game is over." Arvahan's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" The figure stepped into the dim torchlight, revealing a face Arvahan recognized instantly. It was someone he never would have suspected, someone who had stood beside the king from the very beginning. "You?" Arvahan whispered, disbelief in his voice. "All this time, it was you?" The traitor smiled. "Who better to guard the empire than the one who can destroy it?" As the traitor raised a dagger, the screen fades to black. The final words hang in the darkness. In the world of spies, trust is the deadliest illusion. The dawn over the Persian capital was eerily silent. No birds sang. No merchants shouted their morning bargains. The city seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the storm about to break. In the palace dungeon, Arvahan struggled against his chains. The face of the traitor, the person who had orchestrated the downfall of an empire, still burned in his mind. This was no ordinary enemy. This was someone who had worn loyalty like a mask, who had whispered in the king's ear while poisoning his heart with lies. The dagger glinted in the dim torchlight. The traitor stepped closer, voice calm and smooth. "You are always the strongest piece on the board, General. But strength without vision is useless. The king believes he rules Persia. The rebels believe they fight for freedom. In truth, a cold smile curved across his lips. I rule them all." Arvahan spat at his feet. "You rule nothing but shadows. When the light comes, you'll vanish." The traitor's eyes darkened. "Then I will simply extinguish the light." Above, in the grand hall, Cyrus the Great sat alone on his throne. He stared at the three conflicting reports spread before him. Rebels to the west, governors plotting to the east. His own general accused of treason. His heart pounded. Which was real? Which was a lie? The walls of his empire seemed to close in, each whisper another dagger aimed at his back. For the first time in his reign, Cyrus doubted himself. At the gates of the capital, Bardanes' rebel army gathered like a rising tide. Thousands of men, armed with stolen Persian weapons, waited for the signal to attack. But among them moved spies, hidden even from Vardanes himself, agents of the traitor, ensuring the rebellion would never truly succeed. Because the war was never about victory. It was about chaos. The traitor wanted the empire to tear itself apart while he remained the only constant. When both Cyrus and Vardanes fell, he would inherit the ashes. In the shadows of the city, Cyrus slipped through hidden alleys. Every step brought him closer to the palace and closer to death. He carried the truth etched into his memory. The maps, the false messages, the symbol of the serpent eating its own tail. He had no proof, only his words. If Cyrus didn't believe him, he would die like the others. But if he stayed silent, millions would perish in the coming battle. As he approached the palace gate, a guard barred his path. "State your purpose." Cyrus straightened, trying to steady his voice. "I carry a message for the king. If I fail to deliver it, this empire will fall before the next sunrise." The guard sneered. "Another spy with another warning? The king has no need for more lies." But before he could strike Cyrus down, a massive explosion rocked the city walls. Flames erupted in the distance. The rebels had begun their assault. In the chaos, Cyrus slipped past the guard and disappeared into the palace corridors. Inside the dungeon, Arvahan's chains rattled as the battle cries echoed above. The traitor tilted his head, listening. Right on schedule." He raised his dagger high, but before the blade could fall, the door burst open. Cyrus lunged into the room, slamming into the traitor with all his strength. The dagger clattered across the floor. Arvahan stared in shock. "Cyrus? How did you—" "No time," Cyrus gasped, fumbling with the chains. "They're coming for the king. We have to stop him now." The traitor recovered quickly, drawing a hidden blade from his sleeve. "You fools truly think you can stop me? This empire is mine already." He slashed at Cyrus, narrowly missing his throat. Arvahan kicked the weapon from his hand, but the traitor vanished into the darkness like smoke, leaving only his mocking laughter behind. In the throne room, Cyrus prepared to make a final desperate stand. Rebel forces breached the outer walls, storming the streets. His guards formed a protective circle, spears raised. Then, from the shadows, the traitor emerged. His voice was smooth, almost soothing. "Majesty," he said, bowing low, "the rebels are at your gates. But do not fear. I have a plan to save you." Cyrus's eyes filled with relief. You have always been my most trusted advisor." The traitor's smile was razor-sharp. "Yes, Majesty. And you have always been my greatest fool." Before Cyrus could react, the traitor struck. A hidden blade flashed toward the king's heart. The doors slammed open. Cyrus and Arvahan burst into the room. "Stop him!" Cyrus shouted. Cyrus stumbled back, barely dodging the killing blow. The traitor whirled, his mask of loyalty shattered. Arvahan charged, fury blazing in his eyes. "You dare call yourself a servant of Persia? You are nothing but a parasite." Their swords clashed, ringing through the hall like thunder. The traitor moved with deadly grace, every strike precise, every feint calculated. Cyrus grabbed Cyrus, pulling him to safety. "Majesty, you must see the truth. The rebellion, the lies, all of it came from him. He has been manipulating us from the start." Cyrus's eyes widened as the puzzle pieces finally locked into place. Outside, the battle raged. The rebels broke through the final gate, surging toward the palace steps. But they were leaderless. Vardanes had been betrayed by the traitor as agents and slain in his own camp. The rebellion was now a mindless storm, destroying everything in its path. Inside, the duel reached its climax. Arvahan's strength began to falter under the traitor's relentless assault. At the last moment, Cyrus hurled himself into the fight, distracting the traitor just long enough for Arvahan to strike. His sword plunged deep, and the traitor staggered, a look of shock crossing his face. "You? cannot kill me," he gasped, blood staining his lips. "Because I am not a man. I am the whisper that lives in every shadow. Even if you strike me down, another will rise." With those final words, he collapsed, lifeless. For a moment, silence reigned. Then Cyrus fell to his knees, trembling. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered. "My own network, my own creation, turned against me." Arvahan bowed his head. "Majesty, the eyes and ears served their purpose. But power built on fear always devours itself." Karez stepped forward. "It doesn't have to end this way. You can rebuild, not on lies, but on trust." Cyrus stared at him, his expression unreadable. At last, he nodded. "Perhaps if we learn from the shadows." Outside, the rebels scattered, leaderless and broken. The empire had been saved, but at a terrible cost. Thousands lay dead. The spy network was shattered. And yet, the lessons learned that day would echo through history. Years later, stories of the eyes and ears of the king spread across the ancient world. Greek city-states adopted their own secret systems. The Romans built vast intelligence networks to guard their empire. Centuries later, medieval kingdoms would create their own shadowy organizations. Every modern intelligence agency, from the CIA to MI6 to Mossad, traces its roots back to that first network born in the Persian Empire. Because while armies may conquer cities and rulers may build empires, information is eternal. As the camera fades to black, a single question lingers. If knowledge is power, who truly rules the world? A lone figure walks through a crowded marketplace in a distant land. He wears a simple cloak, his face hidden. He stops beside a merchant, passing a sealed message with a quiet whisper. The merchant nods, disappearing into the crowd. The screen fades to darkness as the final words appear. The game of shadows never ends. The story of Cyrus's spy network isn't just ancient history. It is a reminder that the greatest battles aren't fought with swords or guns. They refought with secrets. Even today, nations rise and fall not because of armies, but because of the invisible war waged in silence. If this stunned you, hit like and tell us in the comments. Would you have trusted Cyrus's network or destroyed it? And subscribe for more secrets buried in the shadows of history.